Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the RacingNews365.com podcast, looking ahead to this weekend's Spanish Grand Prix. From RacingNews365.com, my name is Nick Golding and I'm joined, as always, by 2023 Young Journalist of the Year, Sam Coop, and lead editor Ian Parks. Gentlemen, we've had a week of F1 returns back to Europe this weekend for the grueling European triple header. The Spanish Grand Prix this weekend, Ian, is seen as a significant one. There is a lot on the line, but most importantly, is this the weekend where we will find out if we have a title fight this season?
Maybe not so much this weekend, but I think over the course of the next three Grand Prix, without a shadow of a doubt. And I love this. I love this triple header as well. It always makes me laugh because, again, I see more people commenting saying, "Oh, why on earth have we got three Grand Prix in the United States?" Well, guess what? The geographical spread of three Grand Prix in Miami, Austin, and Las Vegas is so far removed from Barcelona, Austria, and Silverstone, which is, if you put it like that, a much smaller triangle, whereas across the United States, geographically, the spread is way, way bigger. So I always find it a little bit of a fun thing there, just to kick this off. That probably get people commenting, I've no doubt, saying, "Oh, what the bloody epoxy on about now?" Well, I'm just throwing it out there, folks. Why not?
What accent was that?
Eh? Well, what the heck?
What accent was that?
It wasn't meant to be any kind of accent. It was just me sounding like a grumbly person moaning at what I've just said. So I just thought I'd do something a little bit different. So, but as I say, I love the triple header. We've had a couple of races in Europe already, of course, Imola and Monaco. They were great for very different reasons. And now this for me is where Europe really kicks in. We always have that strange anomaly of flying away to Canada in between. But here we are, the triple header. And yes, just to directly answer your question, not so much Barcelona. We'll have a really good idea. I do think we're going to have a really good idea, bearing in mind what this track offers in terms of its medium and high speed corners and the layout that it has. But most definitely coming out of Austria and then Silverstone. And when we've done Silverstone, we will be at exactly the halfway point of the season. 12 races done, 12 races to go. And we, without a shadow of a doubt, will have a really good idea then as to the destiny of this title, or both titles this year, that's for sure.
It does feel a little bit scary, actually, that we've been saying how long this season is, but actually we're only 3 weeks away from being at the halfway point already, which does feel a bit crazy. But that kind of sums up this year. It's just flying by. Sam, as I kind of mentioned in the question to Ian, it feels like a significant weekend because there's a lot of teams with something to prove. We look at Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, even those towards the bottom. It's a weekend where it's a track that all the teams and all the drivers know exceptionally well. It does feel like there's quite a lot riding on a positive weekend.
Oh, absolutely. And you're right to allude to the fact that it is a bit of a litmus test because of how familiar the teams are. Historically, we've always tested in Barcelona. Obviously, now that's pivoted more towards Bahrain in recent years, but it's a circuit that there's no shortage of data on. And I think for the teams, part of what's ramped up this weekend is amid the kind of Red Bull struggles, as everyone's kind of referring to them as, Barcelona has consistently been kind of pinpointed as, once we get there, that will be a better read because Monaco is Monaco. Canada, curb riding, it plays into the weaknesses of the RB20. So actually, we kind of don't get a full picture of how much McLaren, Ferrari, and now Mercedes have gained until we get to Barcelona. But I do completely agree with Ian that again is just it's a snapshot. After the triple header, we'll have a much better read.
If we start going through then, I guess, the big teams individually, we've got to start with Red Bull because over the last 4 rounds, yes, okay, Max won in Imola and yes, he won the Canadian Grand Prix, but Red Bull has not had it all its own way. That RB20 has got some problems as they've been open to themselves, especially riding curbs and bumps in particular. That's not as big a problem with the Spanish Grand Prix, and it seems like a lot of drivers are kind of expecting Red Bull to return to their dominant selves this weekend. Ian, if they don't return and have a massive advantage, How significant is that potentially?
If they don't return to their
If
dominant
they
ways.
don't, if what everyone's predicting in that Red Bull are suddenly going to return to having their 20-second advantage in the race, how it feels quite an important weekend for Red Bull to prove that they are still the number one given their recent problems.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, Nick. And I understand that from the perspective of many inside Red Bull as well, that they will be looking now to truly cement their position as that number one team, as they're given that. Bearing in mind, that's the position it's held over these past 2 seasons, and comfortably so. The fact that we've seen a semblance of a challenge from obviously McLaren, Ferrari, the possibility now that Mercedes is coming back into it as well, given the performance that we saw in Canada, and they are fully expecting to build on that. They're boasting about the fact that they've got another upgrade for this weekend as well. And for them, it's just upgrade after upgrade after upgrade. I mean, James Allison came out with pretty much a wonderful quote, Mercedes technical director, pretty much saying that they want to beat the other teams into submission to some degree, with the amount of upgrades that they're going to keep bringing on this car to add performance, because now they truly believe that, unlike in the past, it has a car, a platform on which it can now build. And we definitely saw that at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal. Was it an outlier? For them, this weekend is going to be a really true test of that perspective as to whether it was a one-off or whether genuinely Mercedes is going to be in that mix amongst Red Bull, McLaren and Ferrari. And I'm fully expecting, bearing in mind what we have seen so far, that those three teams are going to really be pushing Red Bull. I am not expecting a Red Bull canter into the distance. Obviously, part of me is hoping that as a neutral from a and I'm going to underline that, a neutral's perspective, and that's all we are on this show. We are neutrals at the end of the day. We don't have a bias towards any team or any driver. All we want to see is beautiful hard racing across the course of the season and a title fight going down to the wire, because that's what provides the most excitement for the majority of fans out there, and for us as media, seeing that result go to the wire rather than a dominant team, no matter who it is, Mercedes in the past, Red Bull at present, wrapping it up oh so early. We don't want that. We want to see these close fights. And I'm confident from everything that's been seen over these past few races that McLaren, Ferrari and Mercedes are going to be giving Red Bull a really good run for its money, not just in Spain, but in Austria and Silverstone as well.
McLaren are quite an interesting team because they're the one team who kind of haven't necessarily been the quickest at a certain venue, but actually they've always been near the top at every single round this season. Lando Norris, I believe, is the only driver to have scored points in every single race this year, which kind of shows that McLaren have consistently been quick. Sam, do you think they'll be wanting to prove this weekend that they are definitely the second best team? Because obviously we saw Ferrari have a disappointing weekend in Canada. McLaren has shown and they've accepted that they're not quite on the pace of Red Bull, and they've been kind of almost level pegging with Ferrari. Do you think this is a track where actually we could start to see who is the next best team behind Red Bull?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been difficult to tell almost with McLaren bringing their updated package to Miami and then Ferrari following suit in Imola, to really kind of get a gauge or a read on which has done a better job there in taking the fight to Red Bull. So there's an opportunity to do that this weekend in Barcelona for sure. For me, I can't help but feel that I've more faith in the Red Bull, in the McLaren updates, just because I feel since introducing them, they've been much more consistent. Ferrari, they brought them to Imola, looked really good on Friday, fell away on Saturday when it mattered, and then obviously at Imola it's very difficult to pass, and it was a bit of a kind of neutralised race in many ways for them. Then obviously you get to Monaco, very good 1 lap pace, it really suited the car, and then following the weekend in Canada where they were nowhere. It was a bad weekend from start to finish for them. So I feel there's more consistency, more stability in what McLaren have brought. which would lend me to kind of thinking that they are now the second best team. Obviously, what we're seeing in the point standings is from the start of the season when Ferrari were absolutely the second best team. There was kind of no denying that. So I think McLaren have made a bigger step than Ferrari.
And we
Ian,
talk about,
got him.
obviously, I was going to say, we talk about, was Montreal an outlier for Mercedes? Well, without a shadow of a doubt, just building on what Sam's just said there, Ferrari will be 100% wanting to prove that Canada was an outlier for them, because that was an absolute shocker of a weekend that they will have absolutely no intention of wanting to repeat, that they will want to be seen to be back on it again and back in the mix, fighting not just for poles, but also wins as well with Red Bull and McLaren.
On the topic of Ferrari, of course, we've seen in the past, and I remember 2022 very fondly, and obviously Charles Leclerc had a massive lead at the circuit to Barcelona, Catalonia before. I'm pretty sure it was an engine failure, which led to a Verstappen win. It's a track that we know Ferrari perform well at, that history proves it. Obviously, as we just mentioned, the Canadian Grand Prix wasn't a good weekend for them. It was the first time this season where they haven't really shown up for any session. Ian, do you think we're going to discover this season a bit about what Ferrari have about them in terms of the ability to bounce back, and if that's something Fred Vasseur has been able to implement? Because we've seen in the past that with Ferrari, one bad race can lead to a few more that follow.
Yeah, you got to expect that. I mean, I was totally surprised with what I witnessed over the course of that weekend in Canada. I never expected a performance like that from Ferrari. I'm pretty certain nobody in Ferrari expected that dramatic dip from one Grand Prix to the next. I mean, the saying goes, you're only as good as your last and whatever it might be. Well, in Ferrari's case, when it got to Canada, you are only as good as your last race. And of course, they did brilliantly in Monaco, and then they got to Canada and it just completely went wrong for them. So we've seen over these past 18 months, since Fred Vasseur took charge, a real change inside that team. He's turned things around in terms of work ethic, mindset. He's played to the strengths of everybody within that team. He's got them pulling in a totally new direction, which they've probably not experienced before. A Frenchman being inside an Italian team, and previously it had 4 Italian team principals since the days of Jean Todt. Frenchman, of course, we all know what Jean Todt did with Ferrari and the remarkable era that the Scuderia enjoyed back in the late 90s, start of the 2000s. So here we are again, a new Frenchman coming in, doing something completely different, completely ignoring what's gone on in the past, ignoring all press, all social media. He has a different way about him, does Fred Vasseur. It's something that both Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc have talked about. His way, his manner, his different approach to doing things. And that has lent itself so far to what was, I would suggest, was a transitional year last year for Ferrari, Fred's first year in charge. They started this year superbly, up until, of course, we then got to Canada. And as I say, was that an outlier? Can Fred and Ferrari bounce back, as you've questioned? This will be a real acid test for them. And you would assume, again, looking at the past and what Ferrari has achieved at the Barcelona circuit de Catalunya, that it should be a good circuit for them and they should be in the mix. So looking forward to this one to see if they do have that bounce back ability, that kind of good old-fashioned word that's been used in the past for a team looking to make sure that it forgets a previous result and moves forward into another good one.
Well, on the bright side, at least Ferrari go into the weekend having finished first and third in last weekend's I say very long, it's 24 hours. Le Mans 24 hours. It was an interesting, that was a bit, you can tell I covered it last weekend because my mind just went then. Let's go on to Mercedes, because we've kind of just mentioned them here and there. Mercedes is another team who, even with, I'm going to use the phrase, their diva cars of the last couple of years, the Spanish Grand Prix is a weekend they've always tended to actually perform quite well. Of course, we mentioned how effectively, had it been dry throughout the Canadian Grand Prix, odds on they probably would have won because they had the pace advantage over McLaren, Red Bull and Ferrari in the dry. Is this a weekend where we're going to see it? Maybe it's too late for a title charge, perhaps, But Sam, how significant is this weekend going to be to understanding, was the Canadian Grand Prix just, a freak event for Mercedes, or is it safe to say the Silver Arrows are back?
It will be important, and partly, as you've touched upon, because of the historic results there. It was their strongest weekend last year. They finished second and third, and that was only just after they'd kind of diverted away from the zero pod, no pod concept. So they had a bit of a mule of a car at this point last season. Over the winter, I was going to say over the summer, over the winter, they've been able to then completely kind of pivot towards the prevailing direction that we've seen from the return of ground effects in F1. So you've got to kind of wager that they will have a strong weekend, and then with those gains, it will be a good snapshot as to actually how close they are to Red Bull, because again, Red Bull will be, as far as we know, and we're thinking, strong this weekend. It's very difficult to see otherwise. So it will give a good indication as to kind of where they are. I mean, as for title fights, they're too far back. But we are starting to we'll be able to start kind of laying the groundwork in the second half of the season as to what 2025 might look like. And if they have been able to realise the gains that we kind of saw in Canada, then yeah, they are looking good. But again, I mean, they're losing a 7-time world champion. So as for future title charges, it's going to be very, very difficult. George Russell is really going to have to show himself in the rest of the season that he can lead that team.
Ian, anything to add? Because I saw you nodding away for those who are watching on YouTube.
Yeah, George for me has a lot to prove. One of those performances in Canada where he was on pole, would he have won it in the dry? As you mentioned in the build-up in asking Sam the question, I think he would have had a very good chance. I'm not sure whether it would actually have gone on to take the checkered flag, but he made 2 mistakes in that Grand Prix.
Yeah.
He knows it. And throughout George's career, he's made these odd mistakes here and there in races that have proven costly on occasion. Don't get me wrong, he's also had some tremendous races as well. But if you want to be seen as a top class frontline driver that can deliver a team a driver's title, he has to eradicate those mistakes. Lewis Hamilton did it during his time at Mercedes when he won his spate of world titles. Max Verstappen is doing it at present with Red Bull. You very, very, very rarely see Max make a mistake. It's like a once in a blue moon thing that you see Max make an error, just driving at the peak of his powers right now. And that's what's tipping the balance, or helping to tip the balance in Red Bull's favour towards them retaining both their constructors and drivers titles this season, is the fact that he's flawless right now. And so just going back to George, he also now has to prove himself to be flawless on a par with Max if going into 2025 he wants to become that lead driver that Mercedes need him to be to lead their title charge next season on both fronts.
There's also, if I could just quickly add, Nick, there's almost a kind of perspective or mindset change that I think George could maybe do with having. Often when he's made mistakes or he's been in the wrong, it feels like he's the last to know or the last to realise. Like, take that incident he had with Bottas a few years ago at Imola. It was absolutely his fault, but he gets out of the car, kind of has seen red, gives Valtteri a tap on the helmet. And there's been a couple of other instances where you kind of think, no, actually, I think you, on balance, probably have more responsibility there. And I think if he can start to better see that objectively, I think it will help his approach in races and go some way to eradicating those mistakes. Because I think it's quite a kind of an encompassing thing, really, how to kind of almost remove yourself in the subjectivity when racing, and it will help knowing when to go for a gap, go for whatever, and also in terms of the unforced errors, knowing when to not push it too far, and that's ultimately what is leading to those mistakes for George.
Interesting. I was just enjoying seeing you two just debate away. I think as well, though, you mentioned about, for example, Imola 2021, I believe it was. Adrenaline is also an incredible thing in that moment as well. I can't even imagine, what was, going through his body, probably something that would, kill me, in all fairness. Let's sticking with Mercedes, though, because last week there was some, I'm going to let Sam have his moment. So,
I'm sorry,
it's true. It's true.
So much adrenaline, it would kill a normal person. But it is, though, it's a good point. It's a good point, isn't it? Like
the amount of adrenaline they go through. Can you imagine lining up on the grid, for example, waiting for those lights to go out before charging into the first corner, for example, this weekend, which is one of the longest runs into turn one. I just think it is a different world, as we've kind of mentioned before. But sticking with Mercedes, and I suppose the most significant news last week regarding its teenage sensation, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, who we'd previously obviously explained he was unable to make an F1 debut due to being 17 years old, and the rules stating under the FIA International Sporting Code, you have to be 18 years old, which he turns on the race day of the Dutch Grand Prix. Ian, there has been a significant changing to the wording, and Antonelli can officially make his F1 debut.
Yeah, we unofficially described this as the Verstappen rule, didn't we? Because if you remember, Max made his F1 debut when he was just 17 years old. He actually made his Grand Prix debut for Toro Rosso when he was pretty much 17 and a half. I think it was something like 17 years and 166 days or something like that.
Just to be precise.
Just to be precise. I think I'm
20 days.
About right in saying that. Yeah, I think I'm about right in saying that. And of course, back then it was, this is too soon, it's too young, etc., etc. But proved everybody wrong by the fact that wasn't too young at all. But the FIA changed the rule on the back of that. And now they've changed it back again, pretty much, basically, because we have this young teenage sensation who is 17 years old right now, Andrea Kimi Antonelli. There's been lots of talk about him being the next, if you want to put it, the next Max, potentially. Who knows? He does appear to have, he's got an absolutely stellar junior career, has pretty much won everything that he's taken part in, going through a really difficult period in F2, but that's simply because a Prima Racing's car is not giving him and his teammate Ollie Behrman the opportunity to challenge for poles and challenge for wins on a consistent basis. So Prima really having a difficult season. So don't look at what he's doing in F2 right now and thinking, oh, well, he can't cut it in F2. No, that's definitely not the case. Look at what he's done in his junior career. That F2 car, as I say, is not a good one right now. And the fact that, and underlined by the fact that the pair of them, both Andrea and Ollie, are struggling in it, just goes to show. So, but as I say, 17 years old, another teenage sensation coming through. We know that around the Miami Grand Prix weekend, an application was made by a team. We understand that to be Williams, even though it was denied by them over that particular period of time. An application was made to the FIA to try and amend this rule to ensure that not so much just Andrea Kimi Antonelli, but that's who they're targeting, of course, but any driver that has the talent, that has the super license, that has gone through a stellar junior career like Andrea has the opportunity to make their debut before they turn 18. And lo and behold, the FIA decides that actually, yes, we're going to change the rule back to pretty much the way it used to be. Obviously, you have to have your super license. You have to have accumulated enough points. It will be at the discretion of the FIA whether they allow a 17-year-old to make their F1 debut. But that is certainly what could be the case right now with Andrea, that he could sit in an F1 car before his 18th birthday over a Grand Prix weekend.
And it's important to note as well that obviously whilst his results in F2 might look underwhelming, actually he's been doing some tests for Mercedes and older machinery, most specifically the W13, the team's 2022 car. And what we've heard is actually it's been some very positive testing by the young driver. It still freaks me out that he's 17, could make an F1 debut. And when I was 17, I was in sixth form in my Toyota Aygo going to McDonald's on the lunch break. It's a different world. But the important thing now, though, is that given this rule change, it's obviously nothing's been confirmed. It's probably likely you'd imagine he'll make at least 2 FP1 appearances. But will he compete in a race this season, do you think, Sam? Given the rumours as well that obviously it was Williams who were wanting him to potentially replace Logan Sargent for the remainder of the season, do you think, whether that be true or not, we could see in preparation maybe for a Mercedes seat in 2025? Do you think we could see Antonelli on the grid for a race this year rather than just in an FP1 session?
I think it's certainly plausible, and it's becoming increasingly so. And actually sooner rather than later, because as we know, he was due. He still is due. He will turn 18 at the end of August. So you still got the whole back end of the season, which is traditionally where those free practice sessions fall for the rookies towards the end of the year, the likes of Mexico, Abu Dhabi. So you've got to kind of, by that you can piece together that it's not just about the free practice sessions. If it was, they'd probably wait. And is, Mercedes or Williams or whoever really keen to get him in that car before the summer for free practice? Would you go to that level of effort, or applying for a waiver from the FIA and then seeing the rules change for a couple of free practice outings, over the next few weeks? I would argue not. So therefore, the other alternative is that someone wants to put him in the car this year. We understand if you're Williams, Mercedes aren't going to do it. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if by the time we get to the summer break, he has made his F1 debut.
Ian?
There are different things at play here. The first on Williams' side is if they're allowed to do it. If Mercedes give them the go-ahead, what have they got to lose? They've got an underperforming driver in Logan Sargent, who, okay, yes, he has made a step forward this season. If you speak to anybody within the team, they have quite clearly stated that compared to what he achieved last year, which wasn't a tremendous amount, but he was given an opportunity for this season, that he has actually taken a step forward. But he's been out-qualified by Alex Albon in every single Grand Prix in which he's taken part. So he's not scoring points. He's not looked close to scoring points. So why not just give him the opportunity? Nothing to lose at the end of the day. We all know Williams is on this long-term trajectory project that's not going to come to fruition until 2027, arguably, when they're estimating that's when they're going to be in the ascendancy. So 2025, another season of transition towards that. 2026 with the new power unit regulations, new aero rules, etc. Who knows where they might be? They've obviously got the Mercedes power unit in the back. They're clearly hoping for great things from that. So, as I say, why not give Kimi Antonelli this opportunity? Half a season in the car, building into 2025 as well, year and a half under his wing, and then he transitions to Mercedes in 2026. Flip side, just before Sam interjects, is from everything that we're hearing, Mercedes do not want him to be in that car too soon, or be in F1 too soon. From everything we're also hearing from his management, they don't want him to be in that car too soon. And the reason being is because he's having this difficult season with Prima in F2. They want him to get more F2 experience under his belt. In particular, F2 experience fighting at the front as well. Yes, okay, he's had all of that throughout his junior career, but they just want him to gain that additional racecraft in more powerful machinery before, and I'm going to use one of Sam's favourite words because he uses it an awful lot, pivots towards F1. Trust me, folks, you listen to Sam and talking, and he uses the word pivot a lot.
I thought you were going to say amid.
No. Well, we've had that one as well in the past.
That's
but
bad
these are
now.
the two things to weigh up. yes, Williams have got nothing to lose, but on the flip side, do Mercedes really want this kid? And he is a kid at the end of the day,
Yeah.
he's 17 years old. Do they really want him in F1 so soon? As I say, it sounds like they don't want it too soon, and his management also do not want it. They want him to have this extra experience. So it's a fascinating game that's afoot going on right now. Back to you, Sam.
Thank you. I was just going to quickly add that absolutely on the kind of F2 front, because his results they've been getting better, but they haven't been where you would expect from a prodigy, right? And also someone driving a Prema, you're expecting, as you say, in race wins and pole positions, and that just hasn't been the case for either Kimi or Ollie Behrman. Ollie Behrman's an absolute gift of a benchmark for him, because if he can just perform at that level or perform slightly better, given Ollie's F1 debut in Saudi Arabia, you can see where his level is to a certain degree. But F2 is really key. It's bigger, heavier machinery. The racecraft is the one area where Max Verstappen was really lacking when he came into F1. There were lots of kind of moments and comings together, and you just kind of, the maturity wasn't there, right? That was the one element that you kind of go, he needed more time on that front. Over one lap, the pace, undeniable. So it's really important for Kimi to be able to develop that. But interestingly, and that is absolutely where things are kind of looking for Mercedes and Williams. But there is upside to Mercedes for this. Say Williams, do put him in the car. He has a couple of strong races. Williams, Mercedes can go, you know what, we've seen enough. And it's heading in this direction already for 2025. But they go, we've seen enough. We now have confidence that he'll be able to do it. But yeah, obviously the drawback is if he does struggle, if he does look out of his depth, does that call things into question? So it is a really kind of dynamic and quickly evolving situation. But yeah, everything that's happened has happened for a reason. So it's certainly leading a certain direction.
Well, it's a fascinating situation, as you said. But what's also fascinating is some of our fan questions. For those who watch this podcast and sent in some questions, thank you very much. We have 4. So, Sam, I'm coming to you for this one first, because this feels like a you question. How do you imagine? So, imagine you're an F1 driver for a second, okay? All right. Okay. So, I imagine you'd have to have the haircut, shave the beard to lose, I don't know, probably about 5
Lewis
kilograms.
Has long hair.
Yeah, but nah. How
okay,
do you?
The Nico Rosberg effect, right?
Okay, fair enough.
Shave it all off. Yeah.
Okay, how do you imagine? How do you imagine your relationship would be if you were Max Verstappen's teammate?
Right. Okay. So imagining that, because I was thinking about this, this earlier in terms of going down to the turn 1 in Catalonia, you've got to find the flow state right in order for, as you say, the adrenaline to not kill you. But imagine I am a professional athlete and I don't look like I do.
Stretch of the imagination, but go for it.
I mean, some photos from when I was younger, maybe when I was maybe more attractive than I am now. But anyway,
when
once I get my hair cut,
17,
yeah, we can share some on socials if you like. Honestly, I think I would if I was competitive with Max, I think we'd butt heads, because I can be quite a red personality type. I can be quite direct. I can be quite kind of abrasive. If I'm not able to match him, then it's going to be very kind of. I don't think I'd be a Sergio Perez in terms of trying to kind of fight and then being beaten into submission. I think I would just know my place. I'd be like, you know what, I'm the number 2 here. I'll get the occasional win. Like, winning an F1 race is an incredible achievement. I'm happy with that. I think that's probably where I'll be. But yeah, if I was good enough to fight with Max, I think there would be some sparks.
If Sam Coop was a Red Bull F1 driver, everybody. Ian, we've kind of mentioned this a couple of times before, but I suppose it makes a bit more sense now if, with Antonelli now being allowed to make an F1 debut. Where do we think Sainz will end up? Because the big suggestion, especially through the Canadian Grand Prix, is that Williams obviously put an offer on the table. He is, as said by team principal James Vowles, he is their number 1 target. But with Antonelli now in the picture, do you think that changes things potentially?
Nick, just before I answer that, do we have the names of these people that are asking
Yes,
questions?
sorry, apologies. First
Let's give them
question
a
was
shout out at least.
my bad. First question was Cleany. You can start answering the second question because I didn't write the rest of the names down because I was rushing.
Rubbish.
Ryan, second question was Ryan.
Well.
So this is Ryan's question. Yeah, I know. It's been the Le Mans.
Marvellous.
Le Mans 24 hours has destroyed me. Putting it politely.
Yeah, well, Ryan, we have
driving
debated. Yeah,
Like
Ryan,
me.
we have debated this one in the past about where Carlos Sainz would end up, and the obvious suggestion at the minute would appear to be a toss-up between Williams and the stake Audi situation. We know that Audi want him. That's an obvious. That's a given. They've been willing to bide their time so far to land him. They're giving him this opportunity to make up his mind. And it is a case of what does Carlos want from his short, medium, long-term future. With Williams, he knows he's got a proven team. All the infrastructure is there. Yes, 2025 is going to be a difficult season, but the team is growing, it's building, it's going to have what it hopes is a race-winning Mercedes power unit in the back of its car in 2026. We know there are numerous people coming on board to build up the infrastructure. James Vowles is doing an incredible job so far as team principal in building up that team. But at the end of the day, it is still only a customer team. Audi is not. Audi is a manufacturer in its own right. Yes, for Carlos, next season is going to be awful because, let's face it, stake right now is the back marker. It hasn't scored a point. Nico Hulkenberg knows he's got to go through a whole season of difficulty before it eventually transitions to Audi in 2026. Carlos went there, he'd be in exactly the same position. But how long is it going to take Audi to build up its race-winning, title-challenging proposition? But it is, as I say, a manufacturer in its own right. It's got all the facilities it needs. It's running under its own steam. Williams is beholden to another power unit provider. There's a lot there for Carlos to weigh up. And we can't rule out, as the dark horse, the possibility of Alpine as well. They have been mentioned, so let's throw them into the mix. As to where he's going to go, I'm sorry, Ryan, I cannot give you a definitive answer. I can give you the opportunities that are out there for him, but quite clearly we know Mercedes is off the table, Red Bull is off the table, so it is a clear choice between Williams and Audi, to my mind, with Alpine as that dark horse.
Sticking with you, Ian, the next question comes from Mako. Apologies if I've pronounced any of these names wrong. I'm really sorry. But where do we think Bottas will go next season? Of course, currently a stake F1 driver, isn't contracted for 2025. If Sainz were to go to Audi or stake, that kicks Valtteri out the door. Where do we think the Finn is going to go?
This is a tricky one because just a few weeks ago, for him, it was almost looking like it was a straight choice between Williams and Alpine. We do know, obviously, there is now an opportunity quite clearly at Alpine. Yes, we also know that there is an opportunity at Williams, whilst it has not come out right and stated categorically that Logan Sargent will not be there. I think we can almost take it as read that given James Vowles' push for Carlos Sainz over the Canadian Grand Prix weekend, making a clear play saying, look, Carlos, this is what we've got to offer you. Please come and join us. Don't hear him saying the same things about Valtteri, even though we know Valtteri has had discussions with Williams. We know he has a history/relationship with James Vowles, given their time together at Mercedes. And as I say, we now know Esteban Ocon is out of a seat at Alpine. Without a shadow of a doubt, he'll be under consideration. But I think we might be starting to look at maybe at Valtteri not being in F1 next season, the way things are beginning to shape up for him, which therefore means that he could be looking at other opportunities outside, maybe a WEC drive, something like that. I think that would be a really good opportunity for him, actually. I don't think IndyCar or NASCAR or anything like that. I don't think stateside is his bag. But definitely WEC. I could see Valtteri driving in WEC without a shadow of a doubt.
Good stuff. Right, moving on to the final question. I'm going to open this up to both of you, and it comes from Harry, last but not least. Daniel Ricciardo, do we think he could be at either, and the question said RB, so I'm not sure if they mean what we call Visa Cash App RB, we call them RB, or if by RB he means Red Bull. But do we think Ricciardo could be at either RB or Red Bull in 2026? Of course, it's important to remember that Sergio Perez's 2-year contract is actually a 1+1, so there's not even a guarantee that Perez will be at Red Bull in 2026. Is the door still open for the fairy tale return for the Honey Badger?
I mean, let's get through 2025 first, right? Or let's get a contract for Ricardo for 2025 first.
Good point.
Because I'm not entirely convinced he does get a contract next year, with Liam Lawson waiting in the wings. As for 2026, RB is in Visa Cash App RB is far more realistic. But again, it's out of much like Valtteri's future. It's kind of out of his hands. I think the same is for Daniel. I think his future is dependent on how other people perform and where they go. If he does stay at RB next season, he's got to absolutely destroy Yuki Tsunoda, completely dismantle this growing and prevailing narrative that Yuki Tsunoda is the team leader and should have been the person called up to the main Red Bull seat. He's got to just blow that out the water in order to line up a potential move to the main Red Bull team in 2026, switching potentially with Perez or Perez being dropped. But ultimately, I can't see it. I think realistically, I think he's probably out the door at the end of this season. So for me, neither RB or Red Bull will have Ricciardo in 2026.
Good.
And I completely disagree with Sam.
Here we go.
I think Daniel will be okay for next season. I think he has the support of Christian Horner. We know that without a shadow of a doubt. It's Christian that got him back into Red Bull. And obviously it was Christian that led the call after that test at Silverstone in July last year that allowed him to replace Nick de Vries, who incidentally had a really good Le Mans 24 hours. Just
second after starting last.
Yeah. But I think Daniel will be at RB next season. However, in saying that, he has absolutely got to prove that Canada was not a one-off Grand Prix, that it, just as we discussed whether Canada was a one-off for Ferrari and a one-off for Mercedes, was it that outlier? He beat Yuki in qualifying and he finished ahead of him in the Grand Prix. So these next 3 Grand Prix for Daniel Ricciardo, just as we discussed about these next 3 Grand Prix for the teams overall, these next 3 Grand Prix, Spain, Austria, Silverstone, are absolutely key for Daniel Ricciardo. I think if he can come out of them proving himself as he did in Canada, beating his teammate, then for me, he will be retained for next season.
Good stuff. Well, Kalini, Ryan, Mako and Harry, thank you very much for your questions. And just to finish up, it would, of course, not be a racingnews365.com podcast without a bold prediction for the Spanish Grand Prix. Sam, coming to you first. A bold prediction, please.
We will have the exact same podium finish as we did last year at this race. So that is a Verstappen win, Hamilton and Russell.
Good stuff. Nice and quick. Ian?
I'm going to go for the bounce back ability of Ferrari, and they're going to prove themselves at this circuit, and they're going to land the victory on Sunday.
Okay, and I'm going to go for a Lando Norris win. There we go. I said it in Miami and it worked out well, so we'll go for it again. This has been the latest episode of the racingnews365.com podcast. From Ian, Sam and myself, we will catch you this weekend for the Spanish Grand Prix. See you later.